So today I'm going to talk about frequency. This is one of the terms from the glossary of empowerment at the back of my book. Frequency, a means of measuring the vibratory nature of radiant energy, such as sound, light, or even awareness. The central premise of the gene key synthesis is that you can alter the frequency of light passing through your DNA, thereby speeding up or slowing down the force of evolution itself. Through deep contemplation of the 64 gene keys and their teachings, you can raise the frequency of your DNA and thus change the vibratory frequency of your aura, coming into higher and higher states of harmony with the universal field. So it's another potent definition. A means of measuring the vibratory nature of radiant energy, such as sound, light, or even awareness. So frequency is all there is. Everything, sound, light, every atom is vibrating at a frequency, at a different harmonic frequency, and all those frequencies together are vibrating in the field of life. And so your consciousness exists in that frequency field, which is quite something to think about. We know from quantum mechanics that really this is all we are. We are just sets of frequencies, patterns vibrating in the cosmos, notes hanging in the blue realm of infinity. Arpeggios, pieces of music, constructions of light, patinas and cadences of light and sound. So within the understanding of the gene keys, the whole premise of the gene keys is that we're made up of these frequencies and that we have the capacity to alter the frequency of light passing through our DNA. And that's the important thing, is that the light passes through our DNA. We are transparent in that way. We are a transducer of the light. And when I say light, I mean the light of consciousness, the light of life. And so we can affect the way in which that light is programmed in our local field, and in fact in the entire field. But we begin with the local field, where we can speed up or slow down the force of evolution itself. And this is what spiritual practice is. This is what meditation is. It is a focus on the light and an adjustment of the frequencies, a harmonizing of the frequencies of light as they move through us, as they pulse through us, because they have this pulse. Through deep contemplation on the gene keys and their teachings, you can raise the frequency of your DNA and thus change the vibratory frequency of your aura. And your aura is the signature of all these frequencies, because every cell emits a frequency, every organ in your body emits a frequency, and these different layers of or sheaths of our being, these subtle bodies, which I'll be also going into in this series, also have their frequencies, and we can change their frequencies as we contemplate them, meditate on them. And the idea obviously is to come into higher state of harmony with the greater field. And in order to do that, we have to bring our attention onto the siddhis, these highest frequencies, where our frequency field is in perfect harmony with the consciousness of God, if you like, the divine frequencies, the very highest frequencies. And when I say high and low, it's our way of measuring in our with our brain. We have to think of it in terms of high and low, but actually, one of the other ways we look at it is shadow, gift, siddhi. The shadow is the low frequency because it is where we are not quite in harmony with the cosmos, with those deep frequencies that exist in nature. And I don't just mean nature around us, I mean the entire cosmos, the wheeling of the galaxies, the perfection of the seasons, the flow and ebb of our lives, and the changing patterns on the canvas of life. And so it's in our hands to play with the frequencies and to think of things in a different light, in a new light, in a more awakened light, and to look at life in that higher way, to open up. And obviously we have to tackle the shadows, so we have to tackle the lower frequencies. We have to begin with where we are often. We have to begin with the bad mood or the discomfort or the pain or the boredom or the whatever the shadow is. When you look at the Gene Keys, you see these 64 shadows and their variations. They're repressed and reactive themes. And so we have to be honest to begin with, and then so we look at the frequency that's moving through our body, and we feel it and we tune into it. And then our intent says, right, we're going to raise that frequency. And you begin to subtly change the aura, the signature of light as it enters and as it passes through us. And we do that simply through this contemplative practice. So you might take a Gene Key like the 12th Gene Key, the frequency of the shadow of vanity, the struggle with our nature, who we are, who am I, and the over-identification with my form. That vanity of like, it's all about me, and that, we change that, and we come into purity, and we go, well, actually, the highest is purity. So if you start to contemplate purity, then that vanity, that focus on the individual, begins to dissolve, and you begin to open up your aura and expand into higher frequencies, and you go into the purity of the heart, or the purity of those wider states of consciousness, which are our heritage. And as we contemplate those, then that vanity begins to change, begins to adjust, and we remember. The vanity is a forgetting, and then we begin to remember the purity, and we feel it, and our body begins to then register it. Registers it through the cells, and it begins to spread, and it begins to create, if you could see it, harmonic patterns in our aura around us, just by imbibing that truth. And you can take any Gene Key or any aspect of the Gene Keys or any spiritual teaching or teacher, and just by focusing on those higher aspects, you begin to change the frequency around you. And then, of course, you change the pattern of the interaction of life's frequencies with your frequency. So you reprogram your environment and those around you, and they respond differently to you. And life comes towards you in a different way, in a more harmonic way. So that's the game of frequency and the understanding of frequency. It's a deep one to understand, and it is the foundation of the worldview that we are imbibing through understanding this knowledge with the Gene Keys. Something to contemplate.